The Mars orbital station hummed with the usual activity, a bustling hub of science and military coordination. Captain Elijah Reed navigated through the crowded corridors, his mind preoccupied with the upcoming briefing. The station, hovering in the low orbit of the red planet, was abuzz with rumors of strange readings picked up by the deep space sensors. As Elijah entered the command center, he was immediately greeted by his second-in-command, Lieutenant Marco Silvas. Marco's usually calm demeanor was replaced with a visible tension. "Elijah, you're going to want to see this," Marco said, motioning towards the main holographic display at the center of the room. "What's the situation?" Elijah asked, stepping up to the display which now showed a series of irregular blips closing in on Mars. "We've detected unidentified objects approaching Mars at high speed. They aren't responding to any of our hails," Marco reported, his voice steady despite the growing unease in the room. Elijah watched the display intently, his training as a pilot and a leader keeping his concern in check. "Have we alerted Earth Command?" "Just came off the line with them. They're advising full alert, but it's our call on the ground," Marco replied, his eyes locked on the screen. Elijah didn't hesitate. "Sound general quarters. Prepare all units for a potential hostile engagement. I want every ship ready to launch at a moment's notice." As the alarms began to wail throughout the station, the mood shifted to one of urgency. Crew members rushed to their stations, the reality of the situation setting in rapidly. Commander Rachel Stone, the station's chief engineer, joined them at the display. "Elijah, all systems are green. The defense satellites are online and the fleet is powering up." "Good work, Rachel. Keep the engines hot. We may need to move quickly," Elijah responded, then turned to Marco. "Launch the reconnaissance drones. I want eyes on those objects the moment they're in range." Minutes felt like hours as the crew waited in tense silence. Finally, the recon drones relayed their first images. Sleek, metallic vessels of a design completely foreign to any known human or allied technology. Elijah studied the incoming data. "No visible weaponry, but don't let that fool you. Assume they're hostile. Marco, coordinate with the drone control team. I want constant updates on their trajectory." The unidentified vessels continued their approach, undeterred by Earth's attempts at communication. Then, without warning, a burst of energy pulsed from one of the ships, striking a communications satellite and vaporizing it instantly. "It's a hostile act. All units, engage at will. Protect the station at all costs," Elijah ordered, his voice echoing through the command center. The space around Mars erupted into chaos as human ships maneuvered into combat positions. Elijah watched from the command center, issuing commands with precision. Meanwhile, Marco relayed orders, his expertise as a tactician proving invaluable. As the battle unfolded, Elijah couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whoever these beings were, their technology was advanced, and their intentions were clearly aggressive. Earth was now at war, and Elijah knew that humanity's response to this threat would shape the future of not only Mars, but all human colonies. "Keep pressing them. We can't let them reach the surface," Elijah called out, his team responding with renewed vigor. Elijah sat grim-faced across from General Stanton in the newly fortified war room aboard Earth's flagship, the USS Sovereignty. The walls, lined with strategic displays and interstellar maps, flickered with real-time updates from the front lines. After the surprise attack on Mars, Earth's military forces were on high alert, repositioning fleets and reinforcing colonies across the solar system. "Captain Reed, your report from Mars was concerning," General Stanton began, his voice as steel. "This enemy, do we have any leads on their origins?" Elijah, freshly showered but still wearing the fatigue of battle, nodded somberly. "No concrete intel yet, sir. They're unlike any species in the Galactic archives. Their technology is not just advanced, it's unprecedented." The general leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "That's why your next mission is crucial, Elijah. We've been granted an audience with the Galactic Council. They've agreed to hear our plea and consider our inclusion for protection under their treaties." Elijah's eyes narrowed slightly. Trust in the Galactic Council was not easily given, especially since their promises had been more diplomatic than actionable in the past. "And we believe they'll help us this time. It's the best chance we have. You leave at 0600. Commander Hansen will join you as diplomatic support," Stanton replied, indicating a tall, stern-faced woman standing by the doorway. Commander Linda Hansen stepped forward, extending a firm handshake to Elijah. "Captain Reed, I look forward to working with you. Let's bring a strong case to the Council." The journey to the Galactic Council headquarters, located on the neutral planet of Viridian Prime, was tense and fraught with uncertainty. Upon arrival, Elijah and Linda were ushered into the Grand Assembly Hall, a vast dome lined with representatives from various alien races. The air was thick with a mix of exotic scents and the low buzz of alien dialects. As they approached the central podium, Elijah felt every gaze on him, analyzing and calculating. He cleared his throat and began. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, I come before you as a representative of Earth, a world under siege by an unknown enemy. We seek your protection and your strength to help us survive this threat. A murmur rippled through the assembly as the translation devices worked overtime. A figure rose from the central bench, his scales shimmering under the hall's lights. It was Ambassador Zelnok of the Guerrilla Confederacy, a leading member of the council. Captain Reed, Earth has been a lone player for many years, often choosing isolation over participation. Why should the council intervene on behalf of Earth now? Zelnok's voice was skeptical, yet not unkind. Elijah met the ambassador's eyes, his resolve hardening. Because what affects one can soon affect all. Today it's Earth. Tomorrow it could be any of you. We bring data, evidence of the attackers, and our readiness to contribute to the Council's forces. We do not seek charity. We seek alliance and mutual survival. The assembly fell silent as they considered his words. After a long pause, Zelnok nodded slowly. Your plea will be considered, Captain Reed. We will convene and deliver our decision shortly. As Elijah and Linda retreated to the designated waiting area, the weight of the galaxy seemed to rest on their shoulders. But there was also a flicker of hope. Perhaps the Council would indeed come to their aid. The chapter concludes with Elijah and Linda feeling a cautious optimism. Their plea was heard, and now it rested in the hands of the Galactic Council. The promise of aid was within reach, but whether it would manifest into tangible support remained to be seen. The fate of Earth now hung in the balance, waiting on the word of the galaxy's most powerful collective. The dimly lit corridors of the USS Sovereignty were silent as Captain Elijah Reed paced back and forth, awaiting the Galactic Council's decision. Beside him, Commander Linda Hansen checked her communications device repeatedly, hoping for any signal that would indicate their fate. Hours turned into days, and the tension among the crew grew palpable. Finally, the device buzzed with an incoming transmission from the Council. Elijah and Linda rushed to the command center, where General Stanton and other senior officers gathered around the main screen, their faces tight with anticipation. The image flickered to life, revealing Ambassador Zelnok and several other council members seated in a semicircle. Zelnok's expression was unreadable as he began to speak. Earth and its representatives, after considerable deliberation, the council has reached a decision. Elijah braced himself, his heart pounding in his ears. We are prepared to hear your verdict, Ambassador. Zelnok paused, his eyes shifting slightly before continuing. The Galactic Council acknowledges the gravity of Earth's situation. However, we find that direct military intervention would destabilize the current security framework of the galaxy. Therefore, we offer mediation with your aggressors and humanitarian aid but cannot commit our fleets to your defense. The room erupted in murmurs of disbelief and frustration. Elijah felt a cold fury building within him. With all due respect, Ambassador, mediation will not stop them. We need immediate military support. You promised us protection under your treaties. The ambassador's voice was firm, almost apologetic. Captain Reed, the situation is complex. We must consider the broader implications. This decision is final. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. General Stanton was the first to speak, his voice heavy with anger. They've abandoned us. After all our efforts and the promises they made, they leave us to fend for ourselves. Elijah's jaw clenched tightly. We can't rely on the Council anymore. We need to prepare for war, on our own terms. It's clear now that we're alone in this fight. The news of the Council's refusal spread quickly among Earth's colonies. Everywhere the sentiment was the same: betrayal. As the reality set in, Elijah took charge, rallying his troops and citizens alike. This is not the end, he declared during a broadcast to all human territories. It is a call to arms. We will defend our home, with or without the Council's help. In the weeks that followed, Elijah spearheaded an aggressive campaign to bolster Earth's defenses. New weapons technologies were developed at a breakneck pace, and training programs were intensified. Under his leadership, Earth's military transformed into a formidable force, prepared to face any threat head-on. As Elijah watched the fleets maneuvering in a simulation, Commander Hansen approached him. a determined look in her eyes. "Captain, we've started to intercept some of their communications. We're beginning to crack their encryption." "Good," Elijah nodded, his mind racing with strategies. "Gather all the intel you can. We'll need every advantage we can get. It's us against them now, and we're not going down without a fight." The chapter closes with Elijah reflecting on the gravity of their situation. Betrayed by those they had hoped would be allies, Earth's people were now united by a common cause: survival. Fueled by the sting of abandonment and the imminent threat of annihilation, they were ready to do whatever it took to secure their future. The betrayal had indeed galvanized them, but into a force that would no longer look outward for help, but inward for strength and resolve. Captain Elijah Reed stood before the assembly of Earth's newly formed War Council, a mix of military leaders, scientists, and political figures, all gathered in the high-security bunker deep beneath the surface of the United Nations headquarters. The atmosphere was charged with a determined energy as they faced the reality of their isolation and the need for swift, decisive action. "As you all know, the Galactic Council has denied us the aid we desperately need," Elijah began, his voice echoing slightly off the concrete walls. "In light of this, we must rely on ourselves. We are alone in this fight, but we are far from powerless." He paused, allowing his gaze to sweep across the room, meeting the eyes of those who would lead Earth through its darkest times. "We will build our strength, develop our technology, and prepare our people for war. This is our home, and we will defend it at all costs." Dr. Emily Saunders, head of the Advanced Weapons Research Division, stood and nodded in agreement. "We've accelerated development on several new projects, including enhanced propulsion systems for our fleet, and a new class of energy weapons that could change the tide of battle. We're pushing the limits of what we thought was possible." "Excellent, Dr. Saunders," Elijah responded. "Keep pushing. Every advantage counts." Next to speak was Admiral Lucas Krieg, the chief strategist of Earth's space forces. "We've been running simulations based on the tactics of our enemy. We're adapting our fleet formations and battle strategies to counter their technology. Training is already underway." Elijah felt a surge of pride. "Thank you, Admiral. Precision and adaptation will be key." He then addressed the entire council, his tone firm yet inspiring. "We must all understand the gravity of our situation. The betrayal of the Galactic Council is not just a diplomatic failure, it is a clear message that we are on our own. And so we will act as such. We will not wait for our enemies to come to us. We will take the battle to them." The room filled with nods of approval and murmurs of assent. The sense of unity and purpose was palpable. Commander Linda Hansen, who had been coordinating intelligence efforts, added, "We've made progress in intercepting and decoding enemy communications. We now have a better understanding of their movements and strategies. Knowledge will be as crucial as firepower." Elijah acknowledged her with a nod. "Well done, Commander. Keep the information coming. The more we know, the better we fight." The meeting continued with discussions on logistics, personnel training, and civilian safety measures. Every aspect of society was mobilized for the war effort, turning Earth into a fortress ready to defend itself and strike back. As the council adjourned, Elijah remained behind, deep in thought. He approached a large window overlooking the dark skyline of New York City, now dotted with defensive installations and patrol drones. His reflection stared back at him, a man changed by war but driven by a resolve to protect his people. "We will not just survive, we will prevail," he whispered to his reflection, a vow of vengeance not just spoken but felt in every fiber of his being. The chapter concludes with Elijah leaving the bunker to visit a training ground where new recruits were being prepared for combat. Watching them, he felt a deep connection to each person, knowing their lives were in his hands. This responsibility fueled his determination to forge ahead, to innovate, and to lead Earth not only to survival, but to a victory that would echo through the annals of history. The betrayal had been the catalyst, but the response would be humanity's defining moment. Under the cloak of darkness, a small fleet of Earth's newly developed stealth fighters maneuvered through the asteroid belt, moving closer to the unsuspecting enemy outpost. Captain Elijah Reed monitored the operation from the command center on the USS Sovereignty, his eyes fixed on the live feed streaming from the lead fighter's onboard camera. "Status report, Lieutenant Harris," Elijah commanded, his voice steady over the comm link. "Approaching target coordinates, Captain. All systems are stealth mode active. We're ghosting them," responded Lieutenant Harris, the pilot in command of the operation. Elijah nodded, satisfied. This was one of many guerrilla attacks planned against the enemy, designed to harry their forces and weaken their hold on occupied territories. By striking swiftly and vanishing into the void, Elijah's forces hoped to sow confusion and fear among the alien ranks. "On my mark, deploy the pulse mines and retreat to Rally Point Delta," Elijah instructed, his finger poised over the timer. As they reached the optimal deployment zone, Harris's voice came through clear. "Mark!" The stealth fighters released a series of electromagnetic pulse, EMP mines, which drifted toward the enemy outpost. Moments later, a series of flashes lit up the space as the mines detonated, disabling the outpost's shields and communication arrays. "Direct hit. All targets show significant electrical disruption. We're moving out before they can scramble fighters," Harris reported, the excitement in his voice masked by professionalism. Back on the USS Sovereignty, cheers broke out among the crew, but Elijah remained focused. "Well done, team. Return to base for debrief. We need to prepare for the next sortie." As the stealth fighters made their retreat, Elijah turned to Commander Linda Hansen, who was coordinating the intelligence efforts. "What's the status on their supply lines?" "We've identified 3 critical routes they use for transporting arms and reinforcements. I suggest we target these next," Linda proposed, displaying the routes on a holographic map. Elijah considered the options. "Set up surveillance. We'll strike when they least expect it. Keep them off balance." The guerrilla tactics employed by Earth's forces became a thorn in the side of the alien command. Over the next few weeks, Elijah led his fighters in a series of hit-and-run attacks, each time inflicting damage and retreating before any substantial counterattack could be organized. One such operation involved hijacking an enemy supply vessel. Disguised in stolen uniforms, a special ops team led by Captain Mia Zhang boarded the vessel. The operation was risky, but the potential reward of capturing enemy weaponry and tech was too great to pass up. Mia's voice crackled over Elijah's earpiece. "We have control of the bridge, starting download of their navigation data now." "Good work, Captain. Secure everything you can and set charges. We leave no trace," Elijah responded, monitoring their progress closely. With each successful operation, the morale among Earth's defenders soared. They were not only surviving, they were fighting back and winning. In his quarters, Elijah reviewed the reports of their recent missions. Each victory was a step closer to understanding and defeating the enemy. The captured tech was being reverse-engineered, promising new advancements in their own capabilities. As he prepared for the next day's briefing, Elijah felt a hardened resolve solidify within him. They were outmatched, but not outwitted. The war was far from over, but with each guerrilla strike, they were writing their own rules of engagement, teaching the enemy that humanity was not to be underestimated. Captain Elijah Reed stood at the helm of the USS Sovereignty, overseeing the fleet's alignment as they prepared for a massive counteroffensive. The bridge was alive with activity, each officer and crew member fine-tuning the roles they would play in the upcoming battle. "Admiral Krieg, report on fleet readiness," Elijah called out, his voice firm, resonating confidence throughout the command center. Admiral Lucas Krieg turned from his station, his face set with determination. "Captain, the fleet is at full combat readiness. We've integrated the new energy weapons and shields derived from the enemy technology we captured. Initial tests are promising. These upgrades could be game changers." Elijah nodded, feeling a surge of pride. "Excellent. It's time we take back what's ours. Initiate Operation Starfall. Target all enemy strongholds across the Vega and Orion sectors." As the fleet moved out, the strategic displays in the command center lit up with trajectories and target data. Elijah's plan was bold, a simultaneous strike on multiple enemy locations, designed to overwhelm them and reclaim key strategic points. The USS Sovereignty led the charge, its cannons blazing as it engaged enemy forces near Vega 4. The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering losses, but the upgraded human ships held the line, their new shields absorbing energy blasts that would have been devastating just months prior. "Captain Reed, Vega 4 is secure. Enemy forces are retreating," reported Lieutenant Harris, now acting as tactical coordinator. "Push forward. Don't give them a moment to regroup. Relay that to all squadrons," Elijah commanded, his eyes scanning the forward monitors for any signs of enemy counterattacks. Simultaneously, in the Orion sector, Commander Hansen led another part of the fleet in a critical battle to recapture a mining colony that had been supplying the enemy with rare minerals. The intense firefight that ensued was brutal but brief, thanks to the element of surprise and superior firepower. "We've taken the colony, Captain. The enemy supply line here is cut off." Linda's voice came through the comm link, a hint of triumph breaking through her usual composure. "Good work, Commander. Begin fortification." I want that colony turned into a stronghold, Elijah replied, already thinking ahead to the next phase of their strategy. With each victory, the momentum shifted. News of their successes spread throughout human space, bolstering morale and igniting a fierce resolve across all colonies. People rallied to support the war effort in any way they could, from manufacturing munitions to enlisting in the defense forces. As Elijah reviewed battle reports and casualty lists, the weight of each decision pressed heavily on him. Yet each victory strengthened his resolve to see this war through to a victorious end. His leadership, once questioned by some within the military, was now unassailable. He was not just a commander, but a symbol of humanity's fight for survival and sovereignty. In a significant battle near the Galactic core, Elijah's forces encountered the main enemy fleet. It was a grueling battle, testing the limits of human and alien technology and strategy. The USS Sovereignty was at the heart of the conflict, exchanging relentless fire with the largest of the alien dreadnoughts. The tide turned when Dr. Emily Saunders, aboard the USS Sovereignty, deployed a prototype weapon that disrupted the alien ship's power core, causing a chain reaction that led to its destruction. The explosion sent shock waves through the enemy fleet, scattering their formation and leaving them vulnerable. "Now, all units, full assault!" Elijah bellowed, seizing the moment of disarray among the enemy ranks. The battle raged for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. With their flagship destroyed, the enemy's resolve crumbled and they began to retreat. Elijah's fleet pursued relentlessly, ensuring that this victory was decisive. As the dust settled and reports of their overwhelming victory came in, Elijah allowed himself a moment of relief. The war was not over, but for the first time since the conflict began, victory seemed within reach. Humanity had turned the tide, not just surviving, but asserting itself as a formidable power in the galaxy. The war room aboard the USS Sovereignty buzzed with intensity as Captain Elijah Reed and his command team planned the final assault against the Galactic Council's Central Armada. After their series of decisive victories, it was clear that humanity was no longer just defending. It was on the offensive, and the endgame was in sight. "Admiral Krieg, give me the latest on the Council's defenses," Elijah requested, his eyes locked on the large tactical display showing the positions of both human and Council fleets. Admiral Lucas Krieg adjusted his uniform before speaking. "Their central fleet is stationed around the Council's headquarters on Delara 5. They've fortified their position with additional battleships from allied species. However, our latest intelligence suggests their morale is low. They weren't prepared for our recent victories." Elijah nodded thoughtfully. "They expected us to crumble. They didn't anticipate us knocking at their doorstep. It's time we end this. Prepare all squadrons for a full-scale assault. This will be our final stand." As the fleet maneuvered into position, Elijah communicated his strategy to the captains of each ship. The USS Sovereignty would lead the charge, breaking through the enemy's forward defenses to create a path for smaller fighters and bombers to target the Council's headquarters directly. Commander Linda Hansen, who had been instrumental in gathering the intelligence for this assault, joined Elijah on the bridge. "The Council won't expect us to attack with such force. We have the element of surprise on our side." Elijah glanced at her, a grim smile forming. "Let's not waste it. Launch all fighters on my command." The battle commenced with a barrage of long-range missiles from Earth's ships, lighting up the void of space with violent explosions. As the Council's outer defenses scrambled to respond, the USS Sovereignty and its accompanying dreadnoughts plowed forward, their cannons blazing. Elijah stood resolute as reports flooded in. His ships were making significant progress, but the enemy was resilient. The Council's armada, a mixture of technology from various alien races, was formidable but disorganized, struggling to adapt to the humans' aggressive tactics. "Captain Reed, we've breached their main line," shouted Lieutenant Harris, excitement and adrenaline clear in his voice. "Push forward, target their command ships, disable their ability to coordinate," Elijah ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos around him. As the human fleet penetrated deeper into the Council's defenses, the scale of the battle grew. It was not just a clash of ships and weapons, but of wills. Elijah knew that the outcome of this conflict would determine the future of humanity in the galaxy. The turning point came when a squadron of human bombers made a daring run at the Council's flagship, slipping through the enemy lines and delivering a devastating payload. The flagship's shields faltered and then failed, leaving it exposed. "Focus all fire on that flagship. Bring it down," Elijah commanded, pointing at the beleaguered vessel on the display. With a final concerted effort from multiple human ships, the flagship was destroyed, sending a shockwave through the Council's forces. What remained of their morale shattered, and their formation broke. Seeing the enemy in disarray, Elijah seized the moment. All ships, advance. Secure the headquarters. Today, we claim victory. The battle for Dallara 5 was fierce, but the will of Elijah's forces could not be denied. By nightfall, the human fleet had secured the area, capturing the Galactic Council's headquarters and effectively ending their governance over the region. In the aftermath, Elijah walked through the ruins of the council chamber, the weight of his actions and their consequences heavy on his shoulders. Humanity had won, but at a great cost. He knew this victory was not just the end of a battle, but the beginning of a new era for humans in the galaxy. Captain Reed, Linda approached, her expression solemn yet hopeful. What now? Elijah looked around at the remnants of the council, then back to his trusted friend. Now, we build a new order, one where no species stands alone, where betrayal like what we faced will never happen again. We ensure peace, Linda, a peace that will last. The chapter closes with the human forces celebrating their hard-won victory, but for Elijah, it was a time for reflection and planning. The war was over, but the task of building a better future was just beginning. The war room aboard the USS Sovereignty had been transformed overnight. Gone were the maps studded with conflict zones, replaced now with charts of rebuilding efforts and diplomatic missions. Captain Elijah Reed, no longer just a military leader but now a peacemaker, presided over the gathering of both human and former council species representatives. Elijah surveyed the room, feeling the weight of his new role. We have been given a rare opportunity, he began, his voice resonant and clear. An opportunity to rebuild not just worlds, but trust and cooperation among us. The war has ended, and it is our responsibility to ensure it was the last of its kind. A murmur of agreement echoed through the room. Representatives of different species, some of whom had once viewed humans with suspicion or outright hostility, now nodded in understanding and acceptance. The destruction brought by the war had been a stark reminder of the need for a unified front against aggression. We are establishing the United Galactic Alliance, Elijah announced, the name appearing on screens around the room. This alliance will not be governed by fear or dominance, but by mutual respect and shared goals. Each member species will have equal representation, and together we will work towards a prosperous and secure future. Admiral Lucas Krieg, who had transitioned to a role in security planning, added, Our first order of business will be securing and patrolling our borders. We need to ensure that no other threats can surprise us as the Thrall did. We will also work on integrating our technologies, learning from each other to avoid any gaps in our defenses. Dr. Emily Saunders, now leading a new scientific cooperative, spoke next. We're also proposing the establishment of interspecies research facilities. These will not only advance our understanding of each other, but also propel us forward in health, energy, and environmental conservation technologies. As discussions unfolded, plans began to take shape. Trade agreements were drafted, and a joint exploratory task force was created to map uncharted regions, ensuring that all members would benefit from new resources and territories. Commander Linda Hansen, tasked with overseeing the integration of military resources, remarked, It's a new frontier for all of us. We're not just sharing space, we're sharing our futures. Elijah listened to each report, each proposal, with a growing sense of pride and hope. The devastation of war was giving way to the promise of peace and progress. As the meeting concluded, Elijah stood by the large windows looking out over Earth. The planet had scars, yes, but it also thrived with life and possibility. He reflected on the long journey from those harrowing days of betrayal to this moment of unity. We've done more than survive. We've evolved, he said softly to himself, and will continue to do so, together. The chapter closes with Elijah turning from the window to rejoin the others, ready to face the challenges of this new era. Under his leadership, humanity had not only defended its home, but had also laid the groundwork for a coalition that might one day prevent any species from feeling the need to stand alone against the darkness. As they worked together, a new chapter in galactic history began, filled with hope and bound by a shared commitment to peace and prosperity.